you all for inviting me. I had a few technical glitches because I'm basically a dinosaur, and I had to revert to slides today, and so you may have to listen to a whirring noise as well as try and hear me. But at any rate, when they asked me to come up and speak about the revolving fund and with any things I'd done in Orange County, I thought it was a great day. The only thing I did in Orange County was to do a little consulting on Litchfield, which was over in the industrial park, and helping Andy Hutchinson get it moved to the new site over not too far from here. But at any rate, the governor asked me, I'm basically a biologist. I was an educator for 25 years, and then went into, I thought I could sell real estate, which I soon found out was a lot harder than I thought. But I specialized in historic houses because that's what I knew. And so the governor called me to come and sit down with them and see if I could take over the historic properties revolving fund that the Commonwealth of Virginia had started and had difficulty negotiating its way through it. They would have to get an appraisal and then an approval, and it was just by the time they actually could buy the property, it was either torn down or somebody else had bought it. So I knew historic houses enough. I'm no great architectural historian, but have studied for a lot of years, and at any rate, I dove in. I said, well, I could use a third career, and now I started the program up and got it going, ran it for about 10 years, and now I'm retired, but still helping people with their historic houses, more or less for free now. But at any rate, it's something I love. So I brought some slides of some of the projects, and then we'll go through those and I'll talk about them a little bit. I brought a pointer along just in case. So if we could have the lights off, we'll start with some of the first projects. This is Fall Hill in Fredericksburg. It's up over near that huge shopping center. It's owned like 30-some acres, and this was the home of the Thornton family in the 1720s. And Carl Silver, with his huge development, apparently wanted to put a road through this property and do a lot of developing on it. So I got easements on it, and then we sold it to someone who was capable of restoring it. This is a pre-restoration slide. Let's see if I can find it. And this is during restoration. We had to take the porch off, but the house has been saved in its own garden tour periodically. Just a spectacular property. This is one of the first properties I got, and it looked that bad when I bought it. This is in the city of Suffolk, and it's down near the railroad tracks in kind of an industrial section. But I had a lot of problems. We had to go to court to save this because the owner who had owned it at this time had bought it with easements and would not restore it. So I had to buy him out, and then we developed a plan for it, and now it's one of the city's office buildings.
Gordon, let me interrupt you just a minute. The back row can't see behind me.
Beg your pardon?
The back row cannot see because you're in the way.
Oh, maybe I'll get back here
Why don't you
and
sit
do a
in
little
that row?
better. But at any rate,
Your seats in the front? There's seats on the front.
can you see?
Yeah.
All right. This house is called the Prentice House, and this was my first experience buying and saving this house. even though it looks pretty miserable now. It was built around 1810 and had a lot of good architectural woodwork. And the good thing about a restoration like this, if you have a house that's on the register and you want to restore it, you can get 20% of what you have spent on that house back in tax credits. If you buy a house like this and restore it, you get the 20% plus an additional 25% if it's rental property or used for commercial purposes. So these houses, when you restore them, it contributes back to the local economy. A lot of people think it's horrible to waste money restoring something like this, but it turned out to be quite nice when it was done. This is another one of my projects. This is called the Mason House, and it's on the eastern shore. I took Calder Loth over to see the house when we first bought it, and it looks better now in that picture than it did. And Calder just gasped. He said, "Do you specialize in houses that are one gust of wind from being blown down?" And I said, "Yeah, once they're gone forever." And this house is so spectacular. If you look at it here, there are glazed header bricks in panels all along the front that are laid in diamond pattern. It's called glazed diaphragm, and it comes from England. And this house was built around 1720 to 1730, and it has the last Jacobean staircase of its type in Virginia. So it was very important to save it. And this is a little better shot of it, but you can see the inset panels here. The one chimney is interior. The other chimney on the outline of the brick end was a perfect outline of the chimney, and that's been rebuilt. I'm going over Thanksgiving and take better pictures of it, but I sold it to a doctor friend of mine in Virginia Beach, and we've made it so that it's livable, and it's a kind of house that with an addition in the back that you could actually live in permanently, although it's just a vacation house for him. But it's such an important survival. It's probably one of the only ones that are survived in the colonies. Although if you go up into New Jersey and New York, a lot of those houses up there have diaphragm glazed headers in the ends, the gable ends. So they're really nice. This is the staircase on the interior. It has turned balusters, and I brought in one of the balusters, and I'll show you afterwards. And the guys that turned that, those are turned out of white oak, and it's really spectacular. 4 of them were missing, so I made those 4 to go back, and started looking at them. I'm a furniture person. The guys that turned these balusters were basically turning wood for builders, for cabinet makers. Not everyone had the skills to turn. And I turned a walnut example and have pictures of one of the tables that came from just a few miles away from this house, an early 1710, 1720 table. And you can see the similarity between the baluster here and the table legs. And some of the framing, it has this rare tilted plate construction, which is typical of some early Chesapeake houses. This property is in Powhatan County. It's called Belme. And I worked on this property for 20 years before I even took the job at Revolving Fund. It was built by Philip St. George Cock, who was General John Hartwell Cock of Bremo's son. So he built this house in the 19th century. And you can see it's a pretty massive house and needed millions of dollars worth of work. And this is the granary, a temple form granary with stone columns in the front, and that little bump out over the columns. There's a trap door here where you take your grain or your wheat or whatever, take it here, pull your wagon under there, and drop the sacks of grain down into the wagon. So the temple form had a purpose as well. And it has stone bearings for all the gears that operated the milling equipment. Quite a nice thing to see. We got a new roof on it and did a lot of repairs to it. All I have are the old slides, but it's just a spectacular place in the middle of 2,200 acres along the James River. And we've got easements on all that riverfront land, so it can't be developed. Now this is a little house called Pine Slash, which when I had the revolving fund, I tried my best to save this house because it was collapsing into the basement. This is a home Patrick Henry lived in when he was first married in 1750. And we did dendrochronology looking at the tree rings in this property, found out it actually did date from 1750. Just a fabulous early house. And I have photos of it back here so you can see the interior. Very medieval in construction, quite a nice place. This is Graves' Mill up in Madison County, and we got that on the register. It was much taller. It's been altered through the years, as have most mills. I bought the Tyro Mill in Nelson County, and we documented all of that, put easements on it, and resold it to the new owners who have it now. But this one at least is saved, even though it has a lot of damage. And this is another project I worked on. We couldn't buy this project. In the revolving fund, I could actually purchase the property with the General Assembly's money and put easements on it, sell it to a new owner who had to restore it in a prescribed amount of time. But this one was over in the Valley of Virginia, and went and looked at it, and I went, oh my gosh, this place is just fabulous. It had a complex of outbuildings, this long porch, the evidence of old casement windows, log house too. And anyway, look at the complex of buildings. And this one had to be moved, and unfortunately when they get moved, you lose all of that context, all the archaeology, all of the outbuildings, the vernacular buildings that you want to protect. But at least this went to the Frontier Culture Museum, and that's the Bowman house. I talked to Frazier's, who owned the property, into giving it to them and giving them the money to have it moved. So at least it is in a spot now where people can come and study it.
Where is that going?
At the Frontier Culture Museum.
No, but I mean, where did it come from?
Oh, it came up, I forget the name of the area, but it was a rock quarry going in where it was. It was probably 20 miles up 81 from Harrisonburg.
Oh, okay.
And just sat back in a field. And no one had lived in there for years. But they had a great auction. Apparently the same family had owned it until the Frazier's bought it. And there was great agricultural equipment, furniture and all dating back to the 1760s. But it was a great place to study. And this is one of the log outbuildings, pretty much on its way out.
Wow.
This house in Pennsylvania County, I put this in, this was a really good example. This house was ready to be torn down and the woodwork was going to North Carolina. And I couldn't buy it, so the lady didn't want to sell the land. So I went down and spent a week going through the house with her. And she was a veterinarian, so she had the funds to restore it, but just not the impetus. So I spent a week down there looking at the house with her and tearing out sheet rock. This was completely covered over the front door, and you could not see it, and it's intact. Wonderful fanlight. And the inside, this is wainscoting with the chair rail above. When this wainscot was put in, they had this sandstone in that area. You see a lot of walls made out of it, and it's a fossiliferous sandstone, so if you're looking at fossils in here, they painted this to look like stone, and then all the reading and fluting in the chair rail. It's just a spectacular house. And here you have blind fretwork around the door, and when you clean, I cleaned it with a little Windex, and it was painted Chinese red on the interior with the raised portions being green. But just spectacular work for down there in Pennsylvania County, about an 1819 house. And eventually she got so excited about the house, she went ahead and restored it. It's sitting where it is. And these are some of the mantels. The scary thing is, just down the road, maybe 5 miles away, is this little house called Woodlawn. And you look at it from the outside, you'd swear it bore no relationship to Little Cherry Stone. Well, when you get inside, here's the bad shot of the mantel. Not good ones or any other, but it has that same wainscoting that's painted to look like cut stone. That's the last one.
Talk to me a little bit about this, the financing again, because you're using general assembly money,
Right.
and you buy,
Yeah.
and then you sell, but
Correct.
you're not selling
And then you put the money back in the fund.
the money, but there's a deficit in there somewhere.
No. The deficit would be in the administration of the program. You know, you have to keep getting a source of money for Preservation Virginia to continue running the program. But otherwise, a couple of times I went to developers out in Hanover County. One had this great little house called Cool Well, and it was right at the front of his subdivision that he was doing. And I said, you know, it would be really great if you'd give me that house and the lot that it sits on. And now that you're naming your subdivision Cool Well after the house, how nice would it be if you didn't have to spend any money restoring it, and we could sell it to somebody who would? And he said, well, that's a great idea. And he signed it over to us, so that money went back in the fund. And every now and then we get opportunities like that, but you have to think creatively in order to get it done. Oh, okay. Was this
What size budget are you running on?
Well, we had $1.5 million from the General Assembly, and
That's
when they
cheap.
asked me about doing the ones that I had done in Orange County, usually these houses are in areas. I had one in Lynchburg that I bought called the Bransford Bonner House, which is a wonderful little house, but it was down on Polk Street, and while I was taking pictures of it, you could see crack cocaine dealers on the next street. People would pull up and they'd hand them stuff. I called the chief of police and I said, I know I'm interfering with the economy here of these guys, but if I can see them, your guys should be able to see them. You know, they came down and packed them all off, but it's hard to resell a house in that area. What you're looking for is an urban pioneer, and consequently, there aren't a lot of those houses in Orange County, but you do have houses that are threatened for other reasons. You know, we can just stop here. I don't think
Yeah,
it's gonna
but you're gonna want that slide back.
No, I'll take that thing home and resurrect my
Oh, is this
slide.
yours?
Yeah,
It's
it's
for Jack.
unfortunately. But at any rate, thank you for trying. I only had a few more slides. But the thing with that house Woodlawn, it was built by the same people that built Little Cherry Stone. And it had the same draining all the beautiful woodwork, and hanging on the walls inside were portraits of the people that lived there in the 1820s. A little girl holding her cat, the builder who's standing there with his transit under his arm. All this just fabulous stuff, and I've tried to talk the people into letting us do it with the revolving fund, but they didn't want, they were very nervous about anyone coming down there. So I went back to see the house a year later and it was gone. They sold it to one good thing, they sold it to a fellow who moved it up to Fauquier County. And he bought the portraits and everything else, so at least they'll stay in it. But that was one of Patrick Henry's relatives that built that house, and it really should have stayed there. There's an early mill there. They even have an oil painting of the mill hanging on the wall that had been gone since the 1850s. So these are the things that we try to save. And as I was saying before, these fellows that were turners, this is the early stair baluster made out of white oak. And this is one I made out of walnut. I thought, you know, it would be great to have a gate leg table, because you know this guy made legs and things for gate leg tables. So I have a picture of one back there that it's back in the same family, the Knock family, to the mid-1700s. It's never been out of the family. And the table turned up just maybe 8 miles from the Mason house, which I took the baluster out of, and I have to put it back at some point. But anyway, the importance of this project, though, is that we were able to save, through one means or the other, about 70 houses in the Commonwealth of Virginia in 10 years. And I live in Goochland County now, and I'm talking to the Goochland County Historical Society about starting a revolving fund there. There are a number of people there with funds who would contribute it to start one. Sometimes it's bad, you know, politics get in the middle of some of this at times, but if you're using private funds, you can pretty much do what you can. In Virginia, you can't make someone sell you their historic house because of property rights, but you might be able to talk them into letting you help them restore them, which is what I've done in a lot of instances, or sell it to you and then you could flip it. There's a real good early tavern we're working on now on Route 522. Called Johnson's Tavern. You can't even see it. It's right next to the road, but totally overgrown. But it has a lot of good early features. You can go down in the basement. There's a tavern room with sliding windows where you can hand your drinks and food out to the people sitting in the bar below. It's just a wonderful place. So I have meetings once a month, and we're trying to figure out a way to save these things now. There are a couple of other early spots as well. We found a stone building in the woods that appears to be part of the iron manufacturing industry down there, done by Huguenots. And a friend of mine has 850 acres right there on the river. So the site is protected, but we're getting ready to do archaeology on that and determine exactly what the building was used for and how old it was, because it's not on any maps. And within 40 yards of it is a 1740 Episcopal church site, and you can walk down in the depression, and the bricks are massive, oversized, and no one has any idea what the church looked like, so we're raising funds to do archaeology on that.
Yes, I have a question for you.
Yes,
The
sir.
house you were referring to on 522, is that near the Library of Congress building?
No, it's near Goochland Courthouse. If you're coming,
On 522?
yeah, coming out of Goochland on 522,
Right.
it's about 3.5 miles, and it's on a curve. Got some huge cedars, and it has an early smokehouse, which is really important.
There's one right off of 522 by there, it's buried back and you can't see it from the road. And the people that bought the house were using it for timbering, so for a while there was huge mulch piles there. And I've kind of tried to find out the history of that. I understand there was some family fighting about inheritance and all that probate stuff. But I understood that was one of the older brick houses in that area,
Yeah,
but
and
can't get to it.
I don't know that one.
There's no road to it.
Yeah, I'm helping some people with the house now. I do, Sarah Lee Barnes and I do tours for Colonial Williamsburg, for antiques for them. And I'm doing some early houses in the edge of Goochland, but we're also doing one that was called Rocky Mills, which was in Hanover County. And they moved it about 20 miles down to the James River on the outskirts of Richmond. And it is spectacular. It has just gigantic raised fluted pilasters. It's all brick with stone coins set in the corners, stone arches over the windows. It was moved in 1929, and these people bought it. They paid, I think, $3.2 million for it. And I went and looked, and I was like, you got a couple $1 million more to spend on this house. No one had upgraded the wiring or the plumbing or anything else, so that's in progress right now. But I'm still working on a lot of historic houses with people, basically as a volunteer.
How much staff do you have?
Beg your pardon?
How much staff do you have?
I have a Boykin Spaniel. When the governor asked me to take this job, I said, you know, I've had 2 careers and I don't need a third. I said, but if my dog can't come to the office with me, I don't want the job. So anyway, Maggie they wrote her up in the Norfolk paper as being the preservation dog. So. Yes.
Gordon, who's doing the archaeology for you? You referred to it a couple of times.
Beg your pardon?
And who's doing the archaeology for you on some of these projects you're currently working on?
I've used Nick Lachetti, volunteers on Pine Slash. We did the archaeology ourselves. The Department of Historic Resources. I showed them it had been disturbed somewhat. There were groundhogs living under the house. And basically what we did there was salvage archaeology. But we've used Tom Hobbs is an archaeologist, and he worked with me on that as well. But we use whoever's available. We've had Nick Lachetti come and look at the stone building, and he's recommended a friend of his to do the archaeology. So there we are. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Gordon, for the private homeowner, what resources is available to them to get a start on preservation?
Not a lot. There used to be some money around.
Well, not necessarily money, but resources. So,
Resources.
yes, resources. Where to start to
Department of
preserve.
Historic Resources is really good. They have some real dedicated people, and if you call them, they'll come. And then there are a lot of private people out there who will help you. Most of the time, you've got to hire a consultant to come in. I've helped some people get their houses on the register, and that's a tedious job in itself. It can cost you $4,000 or $5,000 if you just hire somebody who does just that. But if you write up a lot of the paperwork yourself, you can get it started, and then somebody come along. I helped one guy out in Hanover County that had a tavern, and I would write it up, he would rewrite it, and then submit it to the Department of Historic Resources. They'd send it back to him, then he'd call me to come back and help him again. And I finally said, I know you know a lot more than I do, but it isn't working right now. So he finally broke down and submitted the one I had written. and you got it on the register. It's not the most fun. I like hands-on thing. I'm an antique tool person, and when I restored this little house here, Pine Slash, you can see that medieval paneling on the inside. The paneling in this house is also the framing. It's boards this wide set into the sill and into the wall plate, and they're 2 inches thick. And Patrick Henry lived there when he was first married, and it's just a spectacular building. We got easements on it so that it can't be modified, torn down. And I worked for free on that house for like 3 years, replacing things that were completely rotten, and getting it back now where it's serviceable. The easements say it can never have wiring or plumbing or anything modern in it. It's a rare architectural example. There are no others like it in the country. I mean, at Chapel, we did a field school for the William and Mary people and for UVA there. And there's just nothing else like it. We did dendrochronology. It's 1750. Patrick Henry moved in there when he was first married. He was living in a big house behind it that caught fire. And so I think this was his plantation store. It's laid out like several others that I've been to and measured out down in the Tidewater. And I think they were able to live there till they got the Scotch down and took that. But I wouldn't want to live more than a year there myself. It's pretty tight and drafty. Any other questions?
Gordon, do you have any horror stories from your time doing this work on properties, things that just went really bad?
Yeah, when I was working on Little Cherry Stone, there was a section that had fallen down to maybe the height of this room, a little less, and the lady veterinarian that owns it, I was trying to decide whether that was earlier than Little Cherry Stone or not, and it was in pretty bad shape. And of course she rode by and told me, looked up and she said, it's about 100-degree day. She said, now don't fall. You don't tell people that. So, about a half hour later, I caught my foot on a piece of the metal roofing and fell off and landed on another piece of roofing that was on the ground and bounced. And I had a hammer in my hand. I held it out like that so I wouldn't land on it. But I broke these 2 fingers, so I went into the veterinarian's office and I said, Lisa, you caused me to break these fingers, now you got to fix it. I don't do people? I said, yes you do. We split them up, and that was all I ever did. I went back and worked for another hour or so. That was my one horror story.
How do you monitor the easements?
The Department of Historic Resources, about once a year, they need to go around and check on these properties. One problem we've had with Pine Slash is I was working for a non-profit when I restored it, and they just couldn't handle it anymore, maintaining the property, and they sold it to a private buyer who is like a ghost. He won't work on the house. It's been 2 years, and there's a leak in the roof. And basically, we've tried, and I went to the Department of Historic Resources and said, "You got an easement on this house. You got to enforce it." Well, we've never done it before. And I said, we never had to do it before. I said, well, now you do. It's your easement and you need to enforce it. Otherwise, if you let this one slide, other people don't let them slide. I put easements, I have a farm on the Rapidan River down here below the historic town of Uno. And anyway, I've got about a mile along the river, and I always worried about what would happen to it. So I put easements on the whole property with the Virginia Outdoors Foundation. Now, you can tailor easements, most people think you give away all your rights, but you can still tailor your easements. On that property, I saved one more building site, and that's it. But you could save 2 or 3 if you wanted to, depending on whether the law would allow you to build on those sites. So you don't give up all your rights. Everything is negotiable. People won't tell you that up front, but you know, you have to think about it and think about your heirs down the line and what they might want. But you sure wouldn't want to see a subdivision down there.
I was, back when I was practicing law, and of course having a farming background, and I have people, you know, I knew from farming, and they'd say, I can't put my farm under an easement, I can't lock all my land up, and I said, you don't have to lock up all of your
No,
land.
you don't.
You can reserve some stuff about it. And they look at me like I invented, you know, water.
Well, you go to Great Britain, you know, they classify houses, the historic houses, and basically like we have them on the register. But basically, they're looking at outdoor, you know, the exterior of the property, unless you go and have one of the grade 1 houses. And you look at pictures of these houses, I get Country Life, and when you look at the ones that are for sale, you look at, wow, what a beautiful exterior. God, 50s modern interior. And it happens. A lot of them sold their woodwork, you know, after World War II. They couldn't maintain the houses, so you sell your interior, at least you could keep the house in the same family or keep it intact.
Yes, Laura, I can make a comment.
Oh, yes.
Can I make a comment? I was probably the first one, I was the first one to put my farm under easement in Orange County way back when, in the 70s. But when it comes to, you could write your own contract with
Yeah.
them. For example, I had 550 head of cattle on the place, and I was dang near going to dig a hole to bury them in every time they died. So we had bottom land, and then we had first terrace, and on up in the hills. I picked a piece of first terrace land out of flood range, where I just dumped the bodies, and we fed our buzzards well.
Oh,
But it was something that I put in, and they accepted.
yeah. Yeah, there are all sorts of things that you can put into them. Yes.
So we had talked earlier about the possibility of people trying to override an easement.
Mhm.
So has that ever been done? Have people attempted to do that?
People have attempted in Chesterfield County, 7 or 8 years ago, a lady had left a piece of land to stay as a park or whatever, and Chesterfield wanted to develop it, and they had a big case in front of the General Assembly, and I don't know what finally ever happened. I think they were trying to trade a piece of land somewhere else so that they could take that land over, and that happens a lot. If you're destroying wetlands up in Northern Virginia, you can come down and buy rights down here to create a wetland equal to or greater than the wetland that you destroyed, which seems horrible to me.
Have you ever worked on churches?
Huh?
Have you ever worked on churches? Like old churches, do that?
No. No, I don't think so. I was on the board of a couple of 1740s churches in Maryland, and we, you know, before I moved to Richmond, that would be 40 years ago, but there were some wonderful, there was one 1733, and a lot of those Episcopal churches like that just don't have a congregation anymore. So we had to develop a nonprofit to raise the money to at least stabilize the church. But, no, I stay away from the religious stuff. Yes, ma'am.
So when you were overseeing the revolving fund, so how did you choose which houses were the ones that you thought were the best to
Well,
invest
the
in?
criteria being that they were either on the register, Virginia or National Register, or they were eligible for that. And people would call me and be concerned about a house, and I'd jump in the car and drive out and look at it first and decide. And then you called in some experts, like Ed Chappell did a lot with me. But, you know, they have to qualify. A lot of these Rosenwald schools, which I see being restored all over the place, you know, and there's a ton of them, they're not rare, but they make great community centers, and if you can get tax credits for restoring them, if you do. So, you know, there are a lot of factors that enter into it.
Have you ever seen one that you thought should be saved but couldn't be? How bad do they have to be for you to determine that it's not worth the effort?
In my mind, they have to be almost archaeological potential. But I don't win very often on that.
Is the fund still holding any properties or rights to properties that one could, look at and?
Beg your pardon?
Is the fund itself still holding property or rights to property that?
I think we've rolled all of them out. The fund is pretty inactive right now. And I think all the properties have been sold. There was one little tavern that I got down in Halifax County that was right on the road. It had been built by this Huguenot guy, and I couldn't see it ever being livable, but it was paneled inside, floor to ceiling, with just plain board paneling, and it had people's initials. DeJarnick's Tavern was the name of it. It had patrons' initials and dates on the walls, and and you think the only thing you could do to save this house would be to be able to move it back about 20 yards, 30 yards. And so I got the state to agree to that, and I think someone has bought it and getting ready to do it. But it had stone chimneys and a stone-walled English basement. And so you basically have to just move the woodwork back, and the mortar looked like it was mostly clay, and it's pretty sorry looking mortar. So you'd have had to rebuild everything, which is cost prohibitive.
Gordon, is $1.5 million enough?
Beg your pardon?
Is $1.5 million enough money to start?
No, we could use a lot more, but that's all they give us.
And when you were able to do a lot with that?
Yeah, we did. We were fairly creative with it. And you're not buying $1 million properties, you're buying houses in cities and little places way out in the country, and you just, they're getting reused, which is a good thing. It's recycling. You don't have to cut trees to rebuild these houses. Yes.
Gordon, in those Huguenot houses, did you come across any examples of what's called pot en terre construction?
Oh, what?
Well, pot en terre, it's a French construction technique that's visible in French settlements up and down the Mississippi River and all the way down to New Orleans. Where you stick posts in the ground, it's literally like a fence posts in the ground, but you're right next to each other.
Oh, yeah.
And you build your walls like that.
Oh, that's a nurse fast house.
Yeah. In English.
Yeah, in English. I was like, I never heard that term. I've never spent much time down there, but here they built, we did archaeology on a house in Hanover County over like 20 years. We had classes for the Mass Science Center there with kids sifting and all. And this house was a tobacco plantation. It was a cruciform frame house like, the Poindexter's house, crisscross in New Kent County. And there was no evidence on the surface, but we kept looking and finding bits of greenish Westerwald ware and early colonel ware and things, so we decided to dig it. And we got the whole thing laid out. Bill Kelso came and said it had to be he said, "You've got an artifact mine here. I've never seen so many artifacts come out of a place." It was a it burned in around 1720, but it was built like 1680. And you could see where the post holes were when they built the first earth-fast house. And then they cut them off and rolled great big rocks in there, and they had it sitting on rocks. And then lastly, they came and infilled with brick, these really bad hand-made bricks. But it had a stair tower, and we found a bunch of early felling axes and tobacco hose. When the house burned, they just went right into the basement. So, yeah, that was an earth-fast house. But a lot of them, that's your conduit for termites. All right. Well, thank you all. Sorry.